Hey Mikey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Joseph. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Excellent. I'm getting over a cold of some sort, so I apologize if I have to mute to cough, but I'll try not to cough in your ears. Um, yeah, I'm happy you're here. Why don't you just get started by introducing yourself, maybe your current or most recent role in the industry, how long you've been doing it for?
Absolutely. And I have to apologize to you already by calling you Joseph. You just told me you go by Joey, and I already messed that up. So,
I go
uh,
by, no, both is fine.
okay, awesome. So yeah, my name is Mikey Fenton. I have been in the video game industry exclusively in QA since 2007. I started at Electronic Arts, um, and kind of bounced around between Electronic Arts and Hudson Entertainment for a few contracts for a few years. I moved on to a company called Onlive. I don't know if you remember them or not. That was a really cool company to work for. And then from 2013 until uh, June of 2024, I was at Machine Zone slash Applovin. Applovin had acquired Machine Zone in 2020 during the pandemic, which was a very interesting way to be acquired by a company on Zoom. That was definitely an interesting day. Um, Unfortunately, me and um, a lot of my colleagues were laid off in June, as seems to be the trend in the video game industry right now. So I haven't worked anywhere since then, but I um, am constantly active in just continuing to learn about game development and QA, and I keep in touch with former colleagues, either from Applovin MZ or even before that, trying to help people get jobs or give advice. Or I feel like I'm still working in my. I was a senior QA manager at Machine Zone Applovin, so I feel like I'm still mentoring and giving advice to folks, which I love doing. So I'm not getting paid for it, but I'm still working.
I love the mentoring aspect too. I'm curious what maybe drove you to the more QA manager route as opposed to like
Like
more like
individual
a technical
contributor.
role. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like I always sort of thought I would be an individual contributor, or maybe leading small teams as a QA lead or what have you, or projects. Um, I was kind of thrown into the manager role at Machine Zone. Um, we had a manager who had left in, I think it was like 2016. And I had worked my way up there. I started as a contract senior tester, got a few promotions here and there. When he left, I was like a QA supervisor, and basically just leading projects, a little bit of people management, but leading projects. But one thing that I did early on at Machine Zone, because that place is a very, very intense, busy place, and a lot of times the managers were in meetings all day, or just didn't have time to necessarily facilitate like team building or team meetings or anything like that. I kind of took it upon myself to lead, morning scrum or morning meetings, and um, I would start doing one-on-ones with folks on behalf of the manager, and kind of report back on how they're doing, what they need to work on, and all that kind of stuff. So when the manager left, I actually did not want that role, just because I was intimidated by it, to be honest. And I saw what kind of he had to do day to day. I didn't really think it was for me. Um, but we had a really large team. We had a team in Palo Alto and a team in Las Vegas. And credit to them, overwhelmingly, they sort of wanted me in that position. They kind of vouched for me, and I was offered it, and it was such an overwhelming sort of feeling of like respect and love and trust that they gave me, that I went into it, and it was crazy and it was intense, and I learned so much. I was kind of thrown into the fire, and so that's kind of how I got into it. And then once I was in that role, I really loved it. I mean, a lot of it is mentorship, a lot of it is guiding people, putting folks in the right place for the right project or the right tools. And I found that it was something that I loved. However, I definitely always missed testing. I love testing. I love being in the software. I love breaking things. You When you become a manager, oftentimes it's easy to slip away from the ins and the outs of the actual gameplay and what's going on. So that became a challenge. I think it's important to stay knowledgeable in that kind of stuff. So that's a balance. Um, but yeah, I really flourished in it, and I love my team so much. Pretty much at all the companies I've worked for, and it just became kind of a natural progression for me, I guess.
I've talked to a lot of people who have come into the roles they have just mostly by paving that way for themselves. It wasn't like they got promoted into it. It was more of like a natural progression of like they started doing the work and they were doing a good job, so they just kind of fell into it. So
For sure. I would tell folks a lot that would get more responsibilities put on them because they showed something, and I'd always tell them, like, look, if you don't want stuff to be handed to you, don't be so good at your job. You know what I mean? Like you're like if you want to hide and all that kind of stuff, then do that. But you're so good at your job that like people are going to notice, and they're going to give you more responsibilities because they trust you. That often actually kind of works because it's a compliment, and they go, all right, I'll do it. So
I mean, that's how I go about it whenever I'm mentoring. Uh I recognize if they're responsive or ready for like more responsibilities, even if they think they're not ready, to hand that off to them instead of doing it myself to get them that experience and to show others and themselves that they are capable of leading a feature or what have you.
for
So
sure. Can I ask you, how did you? I know we haven't quite got to that yet. I'm interested in how you got into QA and what your background is and what your passion is. And I sort of in light prep for this. I found your other YouTube page, and I can see in the background you're a drummer. You like heavy metal music, and you are in the QA space, gaming space. I'm very similar background. I'm also a metal musician turned QA professional, but I am interested sort of like in your beginnings and your backgrounds, if you don't mind. And you can tell me to stop interviewing you during this podcast as well, but it's sort of like a
no,
natural thing.
it goes both ways. The
Yeah,
drums behind me are definitely like decorative at this point. I like don't touch them anymore. I
right.
back man, how long ago was it? It was 15 years ago. I was drummer in just a local metal band for a while. And that was really fun. Um, just I made like a EP,
Mm,
played local shows. I really miss it. I love playing live shows so much.
same. Yeah.
Just doing drum covers that yeah, I threw up on my personal YouTube channel or whatever. That's funny you saw those. How I came into QA, I was my second year into college. I went to just a local community college here in Illinois because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Mm,
And I was finishing up my second year and I talked to a friend who I've known for a while and he mentioned he was going to DePaul in Chicago for game development. And I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. This was
right.
back in 2000, it was like 2007-ish. So then I looked into it. I mean, I've been playing video games since the original Nintendo when I was 4 years old. So always been a gamer, but never really thought about creating them.
Mm,
So did my, bachelor's at DePaul, really loved that. Just the creative aspect of also making games. I know just because and people tell you just because you love playing games doesn't necessarily mean you'll like making them, which is
Hmm.
definitely true. Luckily for me, I do enjoy both. Um, and during, those years in college, I was not quite sure what I wanted to specialize in. Thought maybe design, maybe like production. And I just fell into QA as most probably did, especially in those early years of
For sure. Yeah.
as like an entry level stepping stone into the industry. And I just stuck with that. I just really liked QA. Uh, During the early parts, I, shadowed one of the senior producers to maybe explore getting into production. It, I it didn't really stick with me, so I just kept doing QA, grew into more senior roles, and like you mentioned before we started recording, I'm definitely a QA lifer too. I don't see myself ever leaving QA. I think there's like so much more room for me to grow and learn. Where I go in the field, I don't know.
Mhm.
Whether I be like a QA manager or get into more automation testing and the more technical stuff, which also interests me. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, I did a little bit of software QA for like 5 years outside of games, which was different and similar.
Right.
Um, it's games are software too, but it was different. Like the speed was different. It was a much larger company than what I was used to. Um, but I took away a lot from there to then go back into games. It was really beneficial. I'm glad I made that switch when I did. And I would advise people who are either have experience in game QA and maybe especially now they're struggling to find more game QA jobs
For sure.
to look into software QA because there's probably a lot more positions available and your skills should transfer no problem. And you will probably hopefully pick up some additional skills there that maybe if you want to get back into games later, you can and it'll be beneficial.
Especially nowadays with things becoming more technical and QA being handed more tools to learn or having certain expectations that they might know certain more technical tools and ways to test. I think that is probably really important to kind of get a feel for both. I hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I picked up more technical skills in that software job, like back end API automation and stuff I never even thought about when I was doing game QA. But
Right. Right.
so, um, yeah, it was really interesting. Uh, I loved just the problem solving, the knowing how seeing the game come together day to day in a broad scope, and working with all the different departments. That's what I love most about QA. What do you love about working?
About QA or the video game
Yeah,
industry or both.
yeah,
Like first of all, the video game industry, like it's just cool. Like it's cool to be a part of it. And you had mentioned you had been a gamer since the original NES. That's sort of my background as well. Like I can remember getting our family getting the original NES, and that basically ruined my life. I mean, from then I've been obsessed with games. I was raised in the arcades. I always say like my second parents were like the arcades that I grew up in. Um, and so it's just a childhood dream to be in the industry. What I really love about QA as a whole, in my experience, and I would imagine you probably have similar experience. Every team that I've worked for, the people, the diverse backgrounds, and just the different characters that you meet. Um, it's so interesting to see like a big QA team. Like if you saw them like at a bar or a restaurant or just hanging out, you would be like, what are all those people doing hanging out? Everyone is so different. Um, and it just makes up this incredible team dynamic with great chemistry and we're all there obviously probably for one reason, and everyone likes games or wants to get into the game industry. But having that super like diverse team come together obviously makes for like interesting conversation, but brings a ton of perspective to tackling game making, really. And I've just loved that about QA. I've been a part of teams that are just incredible. I've made lifelong friends. Some people that I still talk to daily, and I haven't seen in person in like years. Um, and so I've always really liked that about QA. As far as the actual work goes, it's definitely fun to be a part of something big, making games, something that's going to entertain people, something that's going to distract someone for maybe even 5 minutes a day, and make their life a little bit better for those 5 minutes or however long they're playing. Obviously, QA, plays a very important part with um, trying to inform the dev team about bugs. Bugs make the game like not sell well or get bad reviews or make the company look bad, right? Most people don't want to play buggy games. I actually sometimes enjoy playing buggy games at home because bugs can be kind of funny at times. Um, but being a part of that process felt really big. I mean, like I mentioned, my first job was at Electronic Arts, and I grew up playing electronic art games. Um, and sort of, I was such like I wouldn't call myself an EA fanboy necessarily, but I was such a fanboy of just like being there and like seeing all the memorabilia and being a part of that, which is just so like historic, and everyone knows the EA Sports voice and that kind of stuff. And I was like really proud to be a part of that. And when you see your name in the credits for the first time, it's like, whoa, like I helped, like
Yeah.
Starship Troopers meme incoming, right? Like I'm doing my part. So yeah, I mean, just it's cool, it's fun. Um, Obviously, it can be intense and it could be long hours and it can be frustrating at times, but I kind of like to take the good and the bad, and when it's all said and done, I've always had a positive experience with QA. And you learn so much too, which is fantastic. So
It's funny you mentioned the diversity because I've noticed that like at least in QA, because that's what I can speak to, is that a diverse QA team can be a really good strength as far as like people's perspectives as well as just their professional background. I mean, nobody goes to school for quality assurance, like getting
right.
a degree in quality assurance. So they bring just different skills and experience to them to the job, and I think it helps to form a stronger team. Um, yeah, I that's cool that you got to work at a company that you loved playing games. I grew up playing as a kid.
For sure. Yeah.
That's really neat. I totally get that, and I do like to think that we do important work by like maybe giving people a break from their day-to-day grind where they can sit back and enjoy a game for entertainment and for fun. I always joke with my wife, who's a nurse who does like literally life-saving work every day, that like
Right.
her job is so important. I'm not doing anything important. I'm like helping make a video game. Like it's, I guess you could view it in either lens, but I do think we do important stuff. And my wife and I actually met through a video game like 16 years ago
Really? What video game, if you don't mind me asking?
in Guild Wars,
Okay, that's awesome.
way back in, I don't know, 2006 or something. We just somehow connected in the game, and then I don't know, stayed friended each other, and then exchanged like emails and like talking on Ventrilo and then MySpace and then Facebook, and just kept in touch throughout all the years. And then now we're married, and yeah, so it can change people's lives. So
I love that. That is fantastic.
yeah, it's crazy, like so random. So
Yeah, right. Probably meant to be, you know.
it had to have been. That's what we say because
Yeah.
it's just too crazy to be random. So
Right, right. Awesome.
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned you have tons of experience, a lot of experience managing people. What do you or what have you done to try to keep morale high or just to inspire your team to like maintain passion for their work or maybe to like help push themselves in their career, how they can like better better themselves to get to that next step.
Yeah. So kind of a lot of things. I mean, I spend a lot of time as a manager thinking about that and trying new things and crafting ways to do that. And there's different situations and approaches you can take. There's sort of a group approach and there's an individual approach, right? Um, One thing that we did every morning with our team, actually at Machine Zone, we had at some point 24/7 coverage with like different shifts of morning, night, overnight, and even weekend shifts eventually. So not just every morning, like we would have scrums for the beginning of shifts. I wouldn't be there for like the 3 a.m. handoff necessarily. But any meeting that I could make it to, I would lead. And we made it just we just made it a fun meeting every morning. And it's hard to articulate that without it sounding kind of corny and cringy. It's like, let's make it fun, but like we had such a good team dynamic. It was almost like a radio show every morning. We had like bits that we would do. We we oftentimes would open up with the song. I would play a song, and a lot of people do that. But then I would have people like give their reviews of it. Um, I would go to certain people who, for the most part, I would go to the same people who were comfortable talking. But every once in a while, I would try to switch it up and um, throw it to someone who doesn't talk as much. And I definitely wouldn't want to like embarrass anyone, so I kind of knew when to do that and when not to do it. But that's just one example of like the stuff that we would do in the meetings. We would, instead of just talking about what we're planning for our day, which of course we did, I tried to weave in um, sort of banter and obviously news for the day or general notes about what's going on with the team or the company into this meeting. Um, and people loved it. They responded to it. We did it still during the pandemic while we worked from home. It actually became even like more important to do that while we weren't in the same office. Um, and so that's something I would do with the team. I could go on and on and on about that. And oftentimes I would feel like, oh man, am I like losing sight of what we need to do? Should we just be professional and like keep it professional? And I would ask the team from time to time, what do you want to see out of this meeting? Should we do it anymore? Blah, blah, blah. And overwhelmingly, people would be like, no, we love starting our day this way. It's like my morning cup of coffee. Like it's not such a harsh start to the day. It's a little lighthearted. I'm finding things out that I need to know. I'm laughing. We're building, camaraderie together. So that was always very important to me as well. And then on the individual side, it really just depends, obviously, on that individual. Um, as a manager, you have your direct reports, but I always felt responsible to connect with the whole team, whether or not they were under me in like Workday or whatever management system you use. I would try to have one-on-ones as frequent as possible with the whole team. Sometimes it's not as easy, just depending. And I always left the door open for that. So definitely tried to connect with the whole team. And my approach was to be just as real as possible. Um, so, for example, if someone had a gripe with something that was going on in the company, more often than not, I think you'll get a manager that uh, I don't even know how to put it. We'll maybe give them sort of like a corporate answer to it or a corporate approach to it. Not all managers. There's some really fantastic managers out there, but oftentimes, I might agree with the gripe. And I wouldn't necessarily, I definitely wouldn't commiserate because I think that could be dangerous. But I'd be like, yeah, I hear you, and here's my take on it, and all that kind of stuff. But always try to find the positive. Always try to find opportunities for them to grow from it. or learn something from it. Um, and just be real with them. And I would always ask people what they want to do with their career, whether or not it be video games. And from there, try to, kind of tailor one-on-ones to the individual and see how I can help or offer advice. I have too many stories, through not just like my career, but through my life as well, that I'm able to share to maybe um, relate a little bit or give similar situations and how I handled it. Maybe I'll recommend some books or some websites that they can learn more about whatever it is. So definitely took the people management aspect very seriously. It's obviously good for morale, but it's good, I think, for folks to have someone who cares about you, really. And sometimes, no matter what position you're at a company, whether it be QA or like a higher up position, sometimes you feel like a cog in a machine, and bringing humanity to your approach as a people manager, I think, is super important. So
I mean, those have always been the best managers I've ever had, are people who I feel care about me as a person and also my career, and being open with communication and wanting to help provide me with whatever I would need to get to where I want to go career wise has always stood out to me. So I think that's the best way to do it.
yeah, I mean, I think just being real like is infectious, and otherwise people see through it if you're not, it's hard for me to take it seriously. Fortunately, I've had fantastic mentors myself. Um, but I've talked to folks both, again, in the industry and just in life in general, where if it's not real, like, you can kind of see through it right away, and it's hard to pay attention at that point. In my opinion, it's hard for me to pay attention to it. So
Right.
yeah, I think obviously you have to strike a balance when you're at a company. Like, um, you have to be as real as possible. There's certain, you got to be careful about the way you approach things or how you say things, and you certainly don't want to, like I said, you definitely don't want to commiserate with someone or like bash. Like, you want to keep it positive. I think so. It is a balance between keeping it positive and keeping it real, for sure. So
Yeah, definitely. More of like a fun question. What do you
mm,
think for people who don't have experience in QA, and then those who have experience, what do you think is like some of the biggest misconceptions about video game QA for non-experienced and experienced people?
for sure. One of my favorite misconceptions from folks who aren't in the industry or don't know much about video games, is, like I said, our jobs are already pretty cool, but uh, like I have two kids, for example, and like when their friends' parents find out what I do, and then they'll tell like their kids, or they'll be like, oh, Mikey makes video games. He creates video games and he makes them. I'm like, yeah, I create. It's just me. So like, your job is so much elevated from folks who kind of don't know a lot about it. Um, they, or you get the oh, you get paid to play video games all day, um which is funny. Like, a lot of QA folks actually, like, when they hear that, they get like really pissed off, like, no, it's so much more than that, which is true. For the most part, you don't get paid to play video games all day, in the sense that you're not just sitting back and drinking Red Bull and eating Doritos and playing video games. Like, you're doing actual work. um but I think that's a fun misconception. Like, I will let people have those misconceptions all day. Like, it's basically like, I don't know if you're a Simpsons fan or not.
I never got into it
Oh,
actually, but
okay. There's a scene where Bart goes to the Mad Magazine headquarters, and he opens the door, and it's basically the Mad Magazine comic come to life. Like, all the characters are bouncing around and stuff. So I always think, like, that's what other people think that I do. It's just this like zany, fun like environment, and we're just swinging from the chandeliers and like having a good time all day. And I think I usually don't correct people. I let them kind of have that misconception. Um,
Like the movie Grandma's Boy.
yeah, exactly. That's another one where I love that movie.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I
Uh,
haven't seen it in so long, so I don't know if it's still good, but I remember it being great.
right. Yeah. No, it's yeah, taking home your levels. That sounds amazing. Uh, I have to say, there were times at OnLive where it felt Grandma's Boy-ish, in all the good ways, not necessarily some of the more problematic ways, but um, I think misconceptions within the industry. That's a tough one. Something that when you mentioned that you had 5 years of software QA and you got some technical skills, stuff you could bring back to the game QA. I think a lot of folks like not just the video game industry, maybe more so like the broader tech industry. If I tell someone I'm in QA, they automatically assume that it's like an SDET or a QA engineer, or they would be like, "Oh, I worked at this tech company. I was QA as well," and it's like a completely different world. Um, within the video game industry, I think that happens less, but there's definitely times when maybe a new producer comes in and they have a certain expectation that the QA team is capable of doing something that they're either not capable of doing, or they just don't have experience or access to the right tools to be able to do. Um, I think another misconception within the industry is the speed in which we move, which is a skill that you have to a good skill to have as any level of QA, but especially as you get up into the lead and beyond, is effectively communicating updates, especially if you're like in a live service game, which there's a ton of nowadays. Things move really fast. You can't test everything. You can't test every single thing with the time that you're given often. So it's important to prioritize your test plans but also kind of give live updates and risk as you're testing stuff. More often than not, it would be like, you guys aren't done yet. And it's like, we just got the build an hour ago. And for half of us, it's crashing. We can't even launch it, and so there is a misconception about sort of like the speed in which we move at times, I think.
Yeah, those are both great points. Especially the the speed thing. But the technical thing too. Like I would love for myself and just QA in general in games. I think it's catching up, but I want to see more like automation in games. I want to do like more of that. And I'd
Mm-hmm.
like pursue it on my own when I can. I am not an estet. I'm not like a programmer. I will always try to learn and get better at those skills, but I still want to try to do more like automation in games because it has a place and I think it could be utilized. Um, and I think most companies don't do it for either lack of knowledge or interest or money. I don't know. But I think eventually it'll be a lot more common. And especially with AI, who knows what's going to happen with that. But um, I think it's interesting. That's something I'm interested in and I'm always trying to keep an eye on.
For sure. Yeah. Like what do you like when you on your spare time look more into automation or AI? What means do you do that? Are you just kind of like on the internet doing it, or reading books, or watching all the above type thing?
Yeah, a lot of YouTube videos. We use Unity where I'm at, so a lot of just investigation with like official Unity automation frameworks as well as like third-party plugins and messing with them, seeing if it would work with our game and um, just a lot of playing around with things, trying to get it to work or not. Yeah, just a lot of videos on YouTube mostly.
Mhm.
I try to find relevant to whatever I'm doing.
YouTube is incredible like that.
I know,
Literally
and
anything you can think of, you can learn about, right?
it wasn't like that when
No.
I was in school and the early days. So
Yeah, it was like Kimbo Slice and you know, not
yeah,
a lot of learning going on. So
no, definitely not. Excuse me. Um, yeah. What do you try to do to like stay relevant for yourself and maybe for that you try to tell others to like keep relevant in their careers or to grow?
I am I mean, I'm extremely passionate about video games. I don't think that's ever going to change as I age. In fact, it's probably gotten worse. So I'm constantly on YouTube as well, either learning about things or like I love video game history. I'll watch a lot of the story of 3DO or whatever, for example, right? Like super niche kind of things. Um, I think something that's really important to mention, if folks get some value out of this podcast is, and I put these next to me on purpose, but books. I think you should read books in general are fantastic. But these are all video game books. So this one, I'll just show a couple. This one is Blood, Sweat, and Pixels.
A good one.
That's
Okay.
yeah, it's a popular one. That's kind of it's in a nutshell. It's development hell that different games have gone through and lessons you can learn from that. Also, not just history and stuff like that, though. I'm really interested in how to make a video game by yourself, for example. Um, I think even if you're not going to make a video game by yourself, learning about the different aspects of how to do that, right? So I'm not a coder or an engineer either, but I want to learn more about it, even if I never do it myself. You know, when it's super important to just have like even knowledge of like the jargon that's used, if nothing else, to just be better at your job. And then I have a ton of these are all like game design books.
Mhm.
I've wanted to. I mean, I do kind of like design my own. I've never like had any games made or anything, but since I was a kid, I've been designing my own games like on paper at least,
That's awesome.
right? And it's something that I still do for fun, with the hopes of one day maybe doing something myself or starting a small team. I think that would kind of be the dream for me to kind of have my own studio. I love indie devs that are really small teams or even better, like one person. I think it's so incredible and admirable. And then just trying to stay relevant with video game news, checking out different trailers all the time, seeing what's out there, seeing what people like, trying to expose myself to as many different genres as possible. Definitely keeping an eye on the indie scene. I mean, it's easy to keep up with AAA titles and Nintendo, which most of those are great too. But I really like the indie scene, and I think it's also important to stay knowledgeable about stuff in the game industry that you might not even be a fan of yourself. So both my kids are um like really into like Fortnite and Roblox, and I don't have anything against either of those games or platforms. It's more so just not my style of games. But I always am asking them questions about it, trying to learn more about them, and kind of trying to stay up with that because in terms of working in the industry, especially in QA, I think one important lesson that I learned really early on is like you definitely aren't going to like all the projects that you're going to be working on, like from a personal level. Like those aren't the games that you're going to be playing at home. Um, and I think there's advantages and disadvantages of being like a fan of what you're working on, like before you start on it. Um, but a good QA person will be able to work on any project and give the same amount of passion and thoughtfulness to their work, no matter what the project is.
Yeah,
Um,
it's about the process and what QA is as
yeah,
opposed to the project. Yeah.
yeah, and so having knowledge of different things really helps. When I first worked at EA, I worked in CQC or certification, which is kind of like, final functionality and also like the technical reports before it gets shipped off the first party. I was on so many Sims expansion packs. And I had never played The Sims before working at EA. And so it was tough at first, but mostly because of like I just didn't know anything about it, and so I had some friends that played Sims, and so once I you know started working there and was working on it, I would ask them questions all the time, or I would just look stuff up online. Like I think it's really important to be knowledgeable about what you're working on. So
I grew up playing the original Sims on our family computer.
yeah,
That's when that's funny.
do you
Um,
speak Simlish?
I don't,
Okay.
but I had a lot of fun with that game.
Yeah, it is. It's an incredible. It really is an incredible game, and again, it's not something that I would necessarily play at home. I have like after working on it, I would play it at home, but I've seen people build the craziest houses and come up with the craziest scenarios in that game, and I think it's incredible what they've done with that kind of technology for sure.
That's fun. It's fun when you work on like a open-ended or online game and you get to see how the community runs with it and what they
Mhm.
do, the new strategies they find or crazy bugs that they discover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you think of something that, with all your years of experience you have now, that you wish a lesson you learned that you wish you had known earlier at the beginning of your career? It's a piece of advice.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough question only because I feel like that is always happening. You're always learning, and there's always something that you wished you knew earlier. I think for someone getting into QA, what I just said is a good piece of advice for sure. You're not always going to be a fan of the project that you're working on, and in fact, if you're someone who is wanting to get into the QA industry and your goal is to work for the game that you're a fan of, I would suggest being a little bit more open minded about it. Not only because it's a lot harder to like get into like maybe the one place that you want to work, but you're denying yourself a lot of opportunities to learn and to see things from a different perspective, which obviously is going to help. Um, so I think that's important to be really open minded. Certainly, as I progressed in sort of the management, part of my career, the people management stuff to me came natural. The stakeholder management is something that I was also thrown into the fire when I became a manager at Machine Zone, and that can be really difficult. And so learning how to communicate um, to different stakeholders from different disciplines is really important. The head of design is going to be different from the head of engineering. It's going to be different from the general manager. Um, and also, I think there's a certain amount of collaboration that you have to get good at as well. You have to be open minded, but you have to also really learn how to collaborate and compromise with other teams. Machine Zone did live service games with content that at one point was pushed out daily, um, and not just like a little piece of content. Like sometimes multiple features were pushed out daily. At one point, we had like over 100 internal testers. That's like outside of like maybe having like third party vendors and that kind of stuff. Like a lot of testers,
Yeah.
right? Still, oftentimes not enough to get everything done. And so um, at first it was hard to learn this, but eventually I think we got pretty good at it. Compromising on what you're testing, and working with, let's say, the head of design or live ops on what are you most concerned about? What are the must-have things that must work and not break, that we need to look at? We're going to put those up top, and then after that, what are the things that like really should be looked at? Um, and we really should try to make time for it, and those will be kind of in a middle tier, and then obviously the rest is like a nice to have. We can test that after it goes live type thing. Um, that sounds kind of easy on paper, but constantly iterating on that and doing it almost every day until you get to a point where you can kind of predict it, was a challenge, and I guess I was more prepared for that. Um, at the same time, that's not how life works. You can't always be fully prepared for something. You got to be able to adapt, um, which I think probably is the best skill that anyone in QA could have, is be adaptable. Not only in like what you're physically doing, but with your mindset as well. Things sometimes change at a drop of a hat, and sometimes you might do work for weeks and weeks and weeks, and that feature might get thrown out the window. That someone might pivot, and you've done a lot of work which you might feel is wasted. But that's not the way to look at it, and now you got to go do this, or maybe you have to multitask or juggle things, and so being adaptable is, I think, very important. So
Yeah, that's that is a good thing to bring up. One of the skills that I look for too, like interviewing potential QA people, is if they seem they can adapt to change, because it happens a lot. And you could be on a project and get moved to a new project, or just be moved to a different part of the project, and maybe this new team you're working with does things differently, and getting used to their new flow, or if you're trying to bring in maybe new ideas, and you have to see if the ideas you're presenting aren't really working well for the team, like change, maybe just changing how to approach that. I mean, yeah, I've experienced that a lot. So
yeah,
makes
and
sense.
it can be frustrating as well, and I think it's important to just be patient. All of this is easier said than done, right? Like when you're like in a live setting, in a live work setting, right? Like, and maybe you've been working for hours and hours and hours. It's way easier said than done to be patient, but um, it's important to try. All we can do is try, and that's probably advice for many things in life. So
Yeah, you get better at it as you
yeah,
go, I think.
yes, yeah.
Is there maybe a strategy, or maybe a tool or what have you that you've experienced that you think every QA team should use, regardless of the project, or like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Uh, so I mean, I guess it depends on the size of the team, potentially, maybe not. But I've found so much success in embedded QA testers, with different disciplines or individuals or whatever it is. Um, the teams that I worked on, where we started to embed different testers with different um, disciplines like design, engineering, live ops, tools, that kind of stuff. Man, it was just really night and day. Obviously, you get subject matter experts that way, that can be beneficial for the whole team when the whole team needs to collaborate. It's beneficial for whatever team they're working with, because now they're able to potentially get stuff checked early before they're checking it into a build that the whole game team's going to look at. You can catch stuff much earlier that way. Um, you can catch stuff in spreadsheets sometimes before it even gets implemented into the game, right? Like you can get stuff really early. Uh, it brings together the teams, all the teams as a whole, a lot more. Now there's more communication. because we have, folks that are sitting with them. It's really good for cross functionality camaraderie, obviously. I've worked at places where QA was maybe siloed, and didn't have the chance to communicate as much with these other disciplines. Um, which, there's benefit for the workplace, and there's also benefit for the individuals as well. I've seen so many folks that have been embedded with teams, um, learn skill sets to be able to transfer over to different departments, whether it's in that department that they're embedded with. I've seen a lot of folks go be embedded with design and eventually become designers. A lot of folks gain skills to go into project management or production, because it's kind of you need to know a little bit of everything. And so when you see different aspects of development, and you learn about that helps them with that. And yeah, I think more teams should do it. Again, if they're able to. Sometimes a team is a really small team and they have a couple QA folks, and it might not just work out. There's probably ways where you can figure out how to like be partially embedded, maybe. But that's something that is like the first time we did that when I was a manager. It was like, why haven't we done this before? And there was always maybe like aspects of individuals being subject matter experts and working with other teams, but never like truly embedded. So that is definitely something that I think more teams should do if they don't. And I think a lot of teams do that nowadays, from what I understand. And what it leads to, and something I'm super proud of in my time at Machine Zone specifically, which I was there for almost 11 years or 12. I don't even know now. I lost count. The amount of folks from QA who started in QA and then went on to different disciplines within Machine Zone is staggering. I want to say in my time, like 50 or 60 people or something like that. And sometimes it's to marketing, or sometimes it's like to facilities, or a non-gaming uh, discipline. But man, it's like a proud parent moment when that happens. And a lot of them went on to be like just all stars in whatever field they decided to transfer over to. Um, and I don't think you get that if teams aren't communicating and collaborating together. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been pretty fortunate to be on teams that have had good open cross discipline communication. I really liked embedded structure. Um, yeah, I think it would be hard to go back to, or to work on a project or something that didn't have that,
Mm,
because of the benefits that it does have. I really like it, and it does seem really common. So, especially
yeah.
nowadays.
I think it's becoming more and more and more common. I mean, when I started at EA, our department was siloed, but most of us were contractors, um, and they were just very protective of their IP. And
Yeah.
and so it wasn't necessarily like a we don't want to talk to QA type thing. I think it was more just security measures and that kind of stuff. And when I joined, I mean, when I was early in my career, I didn't mind being siloed because things things can be intimidating. You know what I mean? EA is a really big campus with some heavy hitters and stuff, and I don't think I would have been ready to be embedded at that point in my career. So in general, I mean, it can be intimidating. That's the thing, working like with like especially like something like engineering. If you don't have any engineering knowledge, but you've been asked to embed with this team, like you're going to learn. But it can be sort of scary for some folks. But scary is good as well, right? Sometimes we need to do things that are uncomfortable in order to grow. So
That's exactly how I feel about it. I know you're finding engineers asking you to test this thing, and then you find a bug. You're like, oh no, they're gonna be so mad at me.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, the scary things is where I've grown the most. Being in situations where I felt like I wasn't prepared to do it, but then I was, and then yeah, they're really growing experiences for me.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess to wrap up here, I'm really sorry to hear that you were laid off since June. It's really scary what's going on. I hope it calms down soon, but I just wargaming I saw got hit really recently. I saw a lot of friends on LinkedIn posting uh who have been at like wargaming for forever. So
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. But have you found networking to be I'm assuming you have built up a pretty strong network up to this point, and have you seen any benefits to it now, and any tips you can give to people who are trying to get into games or are really new uh into how like to build their network or how it could help them either get a job or like to whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, for me, networking has been, man, I don't even know how to put it. Like, I feel like I got the job at EA on my own somehow. That was kind of a miracle in itself. And from there, I almost feel like every job I got after that, or any company I went to, was because of my network. And that's not to say like, oh, I met someone that is going to just get me into the door and like it's a shoe in. Like you still have to like, kind of earn new positions. You still have to interview and you know all that kind of stuff. But from EA, I went to Hudson. Like I mentioned, I bounced back and forth between Hudson and EA. Um, Basically, a contract ended at EA, and someone that I had worked with there was at Hudson, but he was leaving and just told me about it, right? And I, maybe he put a good word in for me or not. I can't really remember, but through him, I was able to get an interview and get a job there. And then from Hudson to Onlive, it was the same thing. A bunch of people from EA were there. Hey, you should come check it out. It's a really cool technology. It's a really cool team. And same with Machine Zone. It was actually my first QA lead from EA again. Was the QA manager at Machine Zone back in 2013, and thought that I would be a good fit for the team. And I went and interviewed, and obviously stayed there. And so that's like obviously like within QA kind of networking type thing. Um, so I think it's really important to form meaningful relationships with folks. Um, Whether you're going to be like good buddies or just kind of acquaintances, it's really important to stay positive and keep in touch with people. Um, Maybe one day you can help them out type thing as well, right? Like one cool thing about the team that was all laid off previously is we're still trying to help each other out. If I see something that I think is a good fit for someone, I'm definitely going to send it their way, or I'll let a recruiter know that this person is great, yada yada yada. Hopefully, I don't type this person is great, yada yada yada, but you know what I mean. And then from there, I mean, I've kept in touch with a lot of non QA folks as well, and I think it's the same thing. I mean, people will vouch for you. The amount of support that you get, because you had mentioned, I mean, just a second ago, there's layoffs everywhere. If you go on LinkedIn, forget about it. There's the hashtag open to work. This person supports it. This person is resharing the post. There's so much of that, and I think that's great. I don't think that there's so many people open to work, but the community is really looking out for each other. And sometimes when I got laid off, I did this long post, this long rant, and then I noticed that two people that I don't even know reshared it, and it's just like they're just trying to help out their fellow video game industry workers, right? And I think that's incredible. And then we networked through LinkedIn, and now there's a new connection just based on that. You and I connected through LinkedIn because I saw you had a QA podcast that I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Uh, you know what I mean? Like, so it's important to be open and real, and all that kind of stuff. I also know folks who are very ambitious and will put their names out there and talk to the scary higher ups at a company and kind of, I don't want to disparage anything, but maybe schmooze. Schmooze isn't always a great word, but they'll schmooze their way into kind of networking with people. And I've seen that be really successful for people. And I've seen people move on and become like senior producers or like really high up important folks themselves. And so if you're really ambitious, I can't give any advice on how to do that because I've never really done that myself, like try to like move up and all that kind of stuff. I have no disrespect for it though. I think that if that's what you want to do, it's really important to put your name out there, to reach out to people, to genuinely be yourself while you're doing that. That's probably the advice I could give. But I've seen networking work wonders for people, and so yeah, that's my answer on that. Um, this yeah, I think that answers the question. I apologize. I can ramble. Uh,
No, yeah, no, I think it's that should everyone should make a LinkedIn or at least and use it. It's been really helpful for me throughout my career.
mhm,
Um, maybe that's not for everybody's industry, but at least for tech and games, I think it's really helpful at least.
for sure.
And then, of course, in-person networking, if it's available in your area, can also be utilized. Maybe not as common anymore after COVID and things being a lot more remote, but
Yeah.
sure it still exists. And in Chicago, we've had like a local monthly game dev meetup. It for a long time, it did die down a little bit after 2020, but I know they still try to meet up and I try to go to those if I can.
Mhm.
It's fun. Um, Definitely scary for like somebody who doesn't work in the industry and is like doesn't know anybody and looking to maybe make connections. It can be scary, especially if you're not like an outgoing person, but I
Yeah.
would encourage anyone to still try and just go and have a drink or have some food and just make friends. You don't have to don't go there asking for a job. Just go talk to people. Everyone's just nerds and gamers and everyone likes probably the same thing. So just should be easy to talk to other people. So
And even the higher up scary people, like are higher up and scary by title, but they might be just as nervous to talk to someone who's green in the industry as you are to talk to them. You know what I mean? We're all human. Like you said, we're all nerds, right? Like in some
yeah,
sort of way, right? Like there's varying degrees of nerdage, but anyone who's like in the game industry is probably somewhat of a nerd, and I say that with love. And so just keep in mind, like for the new folks trying to network, like they might just not be just as scared to talk to you as you are to them. So just do
I
it.
remember, yeah, long time ago at one of those meetups I mentioned, we were just like at a table and Ed Boon, NetherRealm, one of the creators of Mortal Kombat, just like sat down next to us and just like talking to us, just like
Yeah.
he's one of the big names in the industry. So like just a normal guy. Like it's really cool.
He didn't slide in from the side like a pixelated version and say text speed and slide away.
Surprisingly not. No.
That's disappointing, but that's really cool that you got to meet him. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. One of the perks of being in Chicago, even if it is a little small compared to West and East Coast. But
Mhm.
yeah. Um, I don't want to keep it too much longer, but I guess to end things, I don't know if you have time to play games in your free time, but if you do, what do you like to play?
So lately, I've been on an indie kick. Um, I play most of my games at night after the kids go to bed, but indie games are good for like quick sessions, of course. Um, Lately, I've been playing a lot of Balatro. Balatro.
Mhm.
It's oh my gosh. It's made by one guy. I think it's the game of the year for 2024, and a lot of other nerds will agree with me for sure. But it's like a roguelike video poker game. I highly recommend it. It's uh pretty simplistic looking at first, but I think if you played it, you would be addicted to it for sure. Not even knowing like your personal gaming taste all that well. I think anyone who plays Balatro will be addicted to it. It is just a machine. I actually have it on Steam, my iPhone, and the Switch. I've triple dipped on Balatro. Some other ones I've been playing lately are Dusk and Dusk 82, also indie made by mostly one guy, David Szymanski, who's kind of making a name for himself in the indie world. I would say he has very bizarre games, but those have been pretty awesome. I've been playing a game called Noita. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's Noita, or I might even not even spelled it right, but it's from a Finnish developer. Noita means witch in that language, and that's been a really cool. That's another kind of like roguelike pixelated game. And then I love Mortal Kombat, so I will play Mortal Kombat 1 every once in a while. I'm not thrilled with the amount of space that it takes up on my Xbox. I mean, it takes like literally like half the Xbox space, but definitely like to play that. And I'm not usually a free to play kind of online shooter player, but I have been playing Marvel Rivals mostly with the buddy, and I'm terrible at it, but I still have a lot of fun with it. So
I I tried Rivals a little bit when it came out. Yeah, it's really difficult. Um,
yeah,
I wasn't really big. I tried like Overwatch for a little bit when that first came out, but I'm haven't really been big into like the team arena online competitive games. But Rivals was cool. I'm on like a retro kick. I like plugged my GameCube back in and like
nice.
got been playing that a little bit, and then I like I can very well just download an emulator on my PC and like play Game Boy Advance games on there, but I like bought a Game Boy player for my GameCube and like, I'm playing Pokemon Fire Red on
That's
my
awesome.
GameCube. It just feels different to like be playing with the controller on the TV. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I've been having fun doing that.
What do you have besides the GameCube? Do you have any other retro consoles still in your
I have them
possession?
all,
That's awesome.
luckily. Like I have a bunch here. Like I have my Game Gear still, like all the Game Boys I have, Super Nintendo, which is my favorite console.
Nice.
Um, all yellow looking.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Yeah, and the NES. I was always like a Nintendo kid growing up.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nintendo fanboy for sure. Do you have a CRT TV?
not anymore. No,
Oh,
I
okay.
know that's the best way to play them.
Yeah, and it's funny. I have one for my NES, and I actually got it because the N64 with like the HDMI adapter just looked like straight garbage on an HDMI TV. So I needed a CRT TV for that, and it still looked like straight garbage, but it's N64, so of course it does. But you would be surprised how hard it was for me to find a CRT TV, which is kind of sad in a way. I would go to thrift
That is
stores and
sad.
it took like months for me to find one.
Oh
Uh,
no, maybe I should try to snag one just to have one.
I think, yeah, it could be a hot commodity,
Hmm.
uh, when we're all living in fallout shelters. You'll have a CRT TV and you can play Duck Hunt that way. It's the only way to play Duck Hunt, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
a good idea. I'll have to look on like Facebook Marketplace or something,
yeah,
see if I
yeah,
can
yeah,
find one.
for sure.
Um, you mentioned metal music. What do you listen to?
Um, I don't. I was about to say I listen to everything, but that's just simply not true. I don't. I don't think I like jazz fusion all that much. But I do listen to a lot of genres of music. I actually um, I went to school. I'm going to tangent here for a second, and I hope you don't mind. Uh, I went to school to study music, and actually, the reason that I wanted to get into the video game industry originally was to compose music for video games. I was very naive, and I thought that once I get a job at EA, I'm going to walk into their music creation department, and there's going to be a bunch of people just jamming out. And obviously, it's not like that. Um, but so yeah, I listen to a little bit of everything, but specifically metal. Lately, I've been I think Opeth.
Yeah,
Opeth's probably one of my favorite bands. I really like their latest album.
I'll
There's
have to
a
check it out.
there's a band called Flesh God Apocalypse,
Yeah, I
which
know
is like,
them.
yeah, Italian symphonic death metal. I like their latest album. And then there's a band that I just discovered, who I think is local local to the Bay Area where I'm from, called Dungeon Crawl. Yeah, Dungeon Crawl, and they are a Dungeons and Dragons themed thrash metal band,
Oh,
uh,
neat.
and they are just absolutely incredible. I'm not like a D&D player. I've never actually played it. It's funny because I have these books from the library, these like rule books and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that, and I'm reading a book about the creation of the game right now. But I've never actually played it, but I'm interested in it. I'm actually interested in D&D from just like a designing game standpoint, like because it's like kind of crazy, like game design, right? Like it's like super complicated and intense. So I'm interested in learning more about that. But that band, whether or not you are a D&D fan, is like absolutely like they crush, honestly. Um, I'm trying to keep it as professional as possible since this is a professional QA uh, game podcast. So I will leave it at they crush. They crush.
I'll have, what's the name again? You said Dungeon Crawler?
Dungeon Crawl, yeah,
Dungeon
and
Crawler. I'll have
I'm
to
making this
check it out.
face because I'm like, oh man, do I even remember the name? I believe it's Dungeon Crawl.
I'll find it. I'm
Yeah.
also not a D&D person. I played like one short game of D&D and I was like kind of fun, but it's just not for me. I love RPGs, like video
Mhm.
game RPGs. So like, I mean, they're all built off of D&D in a
For
sense.
sure.
So like, yeah, I'm sure I would appreciate the the lyrics and stuff. So that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Yourself, I mean, I see Bleeding Through and Avenged Sevenfold.
yeah, I mean, I grew up like a metalcore
Yeah.
kid once I got in the metal. Um, but I have listened. I haven't listened to Opeth in a long time, but uh, like the Blackwater part, that was
Oh,
an album,
yeah.
right? So like that old Opeth, that's what I'm familiar with,
Right, right.
and like Catatonia, and I've heard Flesh God some songs. But recently, I mean, yeah, Bleeding Through's coming out with new stuff. That sounds great. I still love Lacuna Coil. I
Mm.
have for since their inception. I've for since like 2018, I've been really into Ice Nine Kills. I think they're so
Yes.
cool. I love horror movies, and when I discovered them, it was like an ad on Spotify for like their first Silver Scream album. I was
Yeah.
like, what is a metal band about horror movies? I'm like, this is amazing. And we saw them live in August here in Chicago when they were
Oh,
touring with
cool.
Metallica. Um, Unreal live show. So
Yeah.
cool.
I actually want to see them. I think they're coming here this summer. It's
They're
funny you
touring
mentioned
again, yeah.
them. Yeah, I think maybe even with Metallica. It's funny that you mentioned them though, because I was listening to them yesterday when I picked up my oldest daughter from school, and the look on her face was not too pleased, but I don't care. Sometimes they have to suffer through. I will listen to their music, and I'm very open. I do listen to a lot of different stuff. Not just metal, but sometimes they have to listen to my music too. So it's just the way
Yeah.
it is.
How
Yeah.
old are your kids?
I have two daughters, 13 and 11.
Oh, nice. My daughter is going to be 5 in May.
That is a fun age for sure.
She's sweet, but it's been a struggle a little bit here and there, but she's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, five is fun and obviously a bit of a struggle.
And
But
my
she's
son's going to be 2.
oh, okay. Okay. That age, I mean, I miss that age for my kids, but two's rough.
Hopefully now we'll see. It wasn't for my daughter. It was like threes. Like
Okay.
she was like fine at 2. I'm like, what's terrible twos? She was totally fine. Yeah, it was when she
Yeah.
was 3.
Right. Yeah. The more terrible threes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this was so fun. Thank
Yeah,
you again
man.
for agreeing to do this. I think it's really a lot of good information. I think it'll be really valuable to people. So
thank you again for having me. I want to say again, I think it's super cool that you're doing this. I think it's important. Um, I apologize for rambling as much as I do.
No,
I could probably sit here for another like few hours and do it, but I won't do that to you, and I doubt anyone would want to watch me ramble on for 4 hours. So, but yeah, I wish you the best of luck with this. I'm gonna do my best to get it out there too and promote it. Like not just my episode, right, but just the channel and that kind of stuff. I saw that you interviewed Dylan. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I actually worked with him very briefly
Oh,
at
okay.
Applovin.
Okay.
Um, so I thought that was super cool, and it's a small world,
It
and
is.
get out there and network,
Yeah,
right?
I met him during an interview when he was at People Fun. They were looking for like I don't know, some QA role. And it didn't work out, but he was just really smart, and like the interview just really stood out to me because he was really personable, and like I don't know, he just was like a really good guy. And like so I connected with him on LinkedIn after, and then just like kept in touch. And yeah, uh I was going to be interviewing at Volition again, like kind of recently, before I got this new job I'm at now. And then unfortunately that whole
Yeah,
thing happened with Volition. But yeah, it is a very small industry once you're in it, for sure.
it
I've heard
is.
people say that before, but it really is true, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Dylan actually. What since we mentioned him, I've noticed he's a really nice dude. I don't even know him that well, right? It was pretty brief when we worked together, and it wasn't every day. I've noticed he's a champion for his people on LinkedIn, and he's constantly shouting people out or highlighting them or whatever it is. And I think that's incredible. And I think we just need more of that, not only in general, but within our industry. So
Yeah,
shout out to Dylan.
shout out to Dylan. He's a good QA leader for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Uh, Thank you again,
Thank you, sir.
and we'll definitely keep in touch. I'll let you know when I publish this and stuff. But
Absolutely. We'll take it on tour, all the late night talk shows and all that kind of stuff. It's gonna be a whirlwind, but it's gonna be fun.
I look forward to
Yeah,
it.
man. Awesome.
All right, take care.
Take care. Thank you again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bye.